Hi, everybody. I'm Thomas Howard. I'm one of the ICE technical marketing engineers. And today I wanted to give you guys a quick intro. Well, not quick, it's going to be a full hour and a lot of demos. But it is kind of basic, but there's going to be some stuff I suspect you may not know if you're not a script kiddie using Python and things. So I mark it as a bit of an intermediate too, but that's not bad to push you guys to learn new things, right? These are all the different things we want to cover today. Lots of different technologies, whether it's on the command line using an application called Postman or even delving into a little bit of Python and hopefully doing some best practices with how to use these kinds of automation environments as well. Um, I want to remind everybody that if you are looking to get started with any kind of automation, programming, scripting, whatever, Cisco has an amazing set of resources at developer.cisco.com or DevNet, where they have so many videos, so many labs, so many things that you can go learn how to do these things, whether it's with ICE or switches and routers or other products that we offer. It's a huge resource for you. And kind of the stuff we're starting to talk about here is APIs, and really it gets into infrastructure as code, or IAC, as some people may know. And we actually have some of that in here for ICE. And there's even some labs you can go try. We have some sandboxes that you can go try out to play with ICE APIs and even Ansible, which we're going to be talking about in the upcoming webinars, as Rigo said. So I just wanted you to know if this is something that's new to you, you want to know more, you want to learn more, these are fantastic resources for you to go try out, as well as all the other great things on the internet, which I'm sure you know how to go find as well. So what we want to do is start talking about REST APIs, or representational state transfer. And REST is really more of an architecture, but it's really a shortcut term these days for how you connect to an API and you basically get data in and out of software. And the way that you typically do it is by representing objects or resources in that software. So in the case of ICE, we have network devices and users and endpoint groups and security group tags and all these different things. And so if you want to represent these things as data structures and be able to manipulate them, create them, add them, delete them, you need to be able to represent them somehow. And this is typically how it's done, where you have these different data types. And here's some example values for you as well to understand. And then you kind of structure them in some markup language or some serialization language. And the way that you've typically accessed ICE is through the GUI, right? And you see this representation within the GUI as drop-down menus and text fields and things like that. But you can also represent it as XML. So there's a data representation of XML, and you can also do the exact same object with JSON. So XML was the first way that it was done years and years ago. So like back in the 90s, we were really into markup languages, and that's where we got XML and HTML. And XML is still carrying through today, but it's really waning in favor of JSON. So that's a good thing because XML is just extremely verbose. So JSON seems to have won that battle with the rise of JavaScript in our browsers and being able to move data very quickly into our mobile applications. JSON is much more compact, much more readable, and the JSON format really helped do that. You can read basically data structures in and out using that JSON format very, very easily. But there's also a new format in town. If you haven't heard of YAML, which is YAML ain't markup language. This new format is what all the cloud kids are using. So this is the way that you are able to specify a resource for a lot of cloud environments. So whether it's Kubernetes or Ansible, a lot of cloud-based operations are specifying configurations in YAML. So hopefully you can see why they like it. You don't have all those curly braces and quotes and things. It's much more compact. It's not as verbose, faster to type, hopefully. Some people still say a lot more complex. And you can, if you really get into it, yes, it is more complex than the basic JSON. But ultimately, it's a lot easier to read, in my opinion. And probably the most crucial thing about it is that it does comments. So you can't do comments in JSON. And when you're talking about infrastructure as code and documenting your configurations and things like that, it really helps to have comments. Uh, so that's why YAML, you'll see that a lot more. We're not going to really use YAML today, but I bring it up just to prepare you because we are going to be doing that when we do Ansible and the upcoming webinars. So just be aware of that. So when we talk about doing REST APIs, it's typically done over HTTPS. And so regardless of how you do it, whether it's with a command line interface, with a tool like Postman, or you do scripting with Python or JavaScript or some other tool, it's all typically done these days over HTTPS as the transport. And the kinds of operations you want to do are basically a get, uh, a post, a put, and a delete. Now these basically map to the get is basically a read, a post is a create, a put is an update, and a delete is a delete. Some of you may know these things from databases as CRUD operations, create, read, update, delete. But the idea here is we want to, create resources, update them, read them, delete them, things like that. And so ICE has a lot of different resources that we have the ability to update. And one other thing to note, since we are using HTTP and HTTPS, is that there are status codes. And there's a lot of them that you may come across. It's interesting. I don't think I've ever seen a 100 series error or informational response. But 200s are obviously quite common when you're doing everything right. You'll see some examples of those today. Redirection messages that says this URL is no longer valid, go over here instead. I think many of you are extremely familiar with client error responses in the 400 range. I think we all had a few too many of those in our lives. And occasionally you will even get the dreaded server error response, which is a 500 series. And so, there's different reasons why you get these, but it's important to understand because when you get these responses back from the server, it's trying to tell you something. And so I put some reasons why you may get them or when you'll get them. Some of them are quite common, and we'll be getting some of those today. I put them in here intentionally because I want you to understand what it looks like and how to get around those things. But just be aware of these things. The other thing I want to mention is ICE has an API gateway beginning in ICE 3.0 to let you basically redirect your web browser to these different services. And with an API gateway now, we can do is we can route everything through port 443 instead of having to go to these individual ports for the ICE extensible REST APIs on port 9060 or PXGrid on port 8910. Everything can just be done through port 443 in ICE 3.1 and later. Now we're on ICE 3.2 now, so we've had this capability in 3.1 and 3.2. When you look at a URL for accessing a resource on the internet, this is basically the generic way that it's specified in RFC 3986. We don't really use the fragment portion in REST APIs, but we do use the rest of it. No pun intended. What we do is, if we want to go look at something, this may be an example of how that looks. And these are the parts of it. So we have a server, we have an endpoint that we're basically the path to get to some resource. You may want to do some kind of a query on that resource. But put all together, we have a base URL, some resource. And here are some examples for you. So we have in the policy administration node of ICE, we want to maybe take a look at an internal user. So we'll have that path if we want to get all of the internal users. And if we want a specific internal user, we need to put the ID at the end. For MNT, for the management and troubleshooting node of ICE, we can get a list of all the active sessions that are going on. And in the case of PXGrid, we can also get a list of active sessions this way. So lots of different APIs in ICE. We're really going to focus on the ERS or Extensible RESTful Services APIs and some of the newer open APIs that we got in ICE 3.1. But all these principles are really the same. So when we talk about being able to look at resources and query resources, uh, it helps to have some query parameters. And I think you guys have all used this in the past. There's, different web searches and things. They always have some kind of query parameters in the URL. So you should be used to this kind of stuff. Uh, but perhaps the most important thing with REST APIs is this concept of paging. So you may have thousands and thousands of objects in ICE for something, thousands of endpoints, thousands of users, thousands of, um, I don't know, I guess we don't have thousands of security group tags or endpoint groups, but you have a lot, right? More than 20. By default, ICE returns 20 resources when you do a query for like internal users. And as a result, you do something called paging. And so when you do a query for all internal users, it usually will return back a URL saying, okay, so we've got page one with these first 20. And if you want to get the next one, you have to basically update the numbers and query for the next page of results. You can change that size to up to 100 currently. We've been asking for those numbers to be increased so we don't have to do as many pages. But so far we haven't received that from the engineering team yet. But that's the idea of paging. I'll show you what that looks like. The other one is filtering. So you may have, like I said, if you got 1,000 objects and you're only interested in like 10 of them, it would be nice if you could filter on the name or the identity group or something that matches that query so you don't have to download 1,000 groups and then go try to filter through them yourselves. You can just put a query in and do it. I usually don't do this. Uh, I don't know. I like to cache things locally and do it on my own. But if you find a good use for filtering, this can be really handy at times. So it really just depends on how you want to do it. I find the syntax a little wonky, but that is what it is. So if you want to try doing something like this, you can compound multiple filters together by just doing multiple filter parameters. So that's one way to do it. And the other one that you may find useful is the ability to sort. So you can assort ascending or assort descending. This is no different than what you would do in a database, basically. And you can pick the column or attribute that you want to sort on. So there you go. So those are some options for you. Now, when it comes to all of the different ICE API resources or endpoints that are available, we have a bunch. We keep adding them. It seems every release now we added a whole bunch of them in ICE 3.1 for you to be able to basically configure an entire ICE deployment from scratch once you get the nodes spun up. And so we have a lot of different things that we're doing. Even in ICE 3.2, we added several new open APIs, and I'll show you what some of those are today. If you want a resource, I cannot overestimate. I cannot estimate enough. Yeah, going to the ICE API reference page, cs.co/ice-API, and you can see all of these resources, all of their attributes, and understand some examples on how to use them. So this is really, really good, as basically this is the definitive resource for how you can understand what's in these different resources, how you use them. Can I do a create? Some of them you can't actually create these resources, you can only read them. So you need to read through and understand why isn't this working for me? Well, maybe it's not a supported operation. You need to go take a look at that. And this is your definitive resource for that. One other thing I want to mention is the guest user. It is special. There's I think a bug been filed against it where uh, you need to be able to create guests, but you can't even do it if you are the ICE super admin. Even if you have that account, you can't create guest users. You must be a sponsor user, a user of the sponsor portal. So I just want to throw that out there to let everybody know that if you're trying to create guest users and you keep getting unauthorized messages, it's because you must be a sponsor portal user, and I'll show you what that looks like. But in terms of permissions, the way that we typically do this in ICE is we have different administrator groups. And in the case of REST APIs, we have these two groups here, the ERS admin and the ERS operator. The ERS admin is basically like super admin. but it can do any object, and it's read or write. In the case of ERS operator, that one is read only. So we don't have any other granularity. We get some people that say, but I only want to allow Thomas to be able to update network devices. I don't want him touching my policy. I don't want him touching my endpoints, just network devices. And the answer is sorry, you can't do that. Someone either gets read write access or read only, so choose well. We have some outstanding requests to make those more granular. We'll see if they come in NICE 3.3, but right now they're still not possible. So just keep that detail in mind. So I mentioned the guest user. We have a known issue for it. So you will get a 401 unauthorized error, even if you use the super admin account. So you need to go ahead and create some kind of a local network access user with something like guest API or something that you can use and put it in the all accounts user identity group. And for those of you not familiar with it, this is the all accounts identity group. You'll find it under sponsor groups in the guest portals area. And if you go into there, there is a little checkbox down there that you need to check to say allow it to access guest accounts using the programmatic interface, also known as the REST APIs. So that's how you would go do that. Once you do that, then that guest API account or whatever you name it will be able to go in and make those create, read, update, delete operations on guest users on the guest user resource. So real quick, just wanted to kind of cover those things with you all. And what we want to do today is go over a few different ways of creating these REST APIs. The first one is curl. This is honestly, this is my de facto default go-to way that I do everything with APIs if I'm not doing like full-on Ansible automation. If I just want to test something out, this is how I do it. So curl is not just for HTTP, HTTPS. It does a ton of different protocols. And so if you're not familiar with this, it's pretty awesome if you want to try something out. So I highly recommend if you don't know it, you should know it. We have lots of support for it across different operating systems. And in the case of Windows, you know what? If you've ever tried to use curl or any other Unixy kind of tool on the DOS command line, you're in for a lot of pain. And so I recommend that you just skip all that pain and you go straight into a Linux environment. You will thank me. And you have lots of options available if you load up the Microsoft Windows Server for Linux. You can go ahead and just launch that really quickly, and you can start using proper command line. I'll just put it that way. I am a bit bigoted there, but good luck trying to do it with DOS otherwise. So there you go. One other little tool, little bonus for you. I'm going to give you some hints at something called JQ, which is JSON query. Go ahead and take a look at this when you get a chance. I'm going to show you some previews of how to use this command, but if you really want to do some crazy queries of the JSON results you get back from ICE, this is a great tool to do it. So just wanted you to know about that one. So with that, we want to go ahead and do some curl demos. And everything you see here will be posted to a GitHub repository that I've created. So I've created the repository, but I haven't posted the code because I didn't want you guys to just go off and, get ahead and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to wait till after this webinar to post it, but it will be there for you. So you can go ahead and replicate everything I've done. If you want to create a cheat sheet or whatever you want to do, it's going to be out there for you. So with that, let's switch over now to our command line. So what we want to do here is actually, you know what? Before we do that, I need to give you a little tour of ICE. No, that's Meraki. We want to go to ICE. So what I've done here is I have created a single network device just to get us started. And the reason for this is because whenever I want to do some kind of REST API, I like to be able to create the object first, see what it looks like as JSON, and then be able to manipulate it from there to do what I want it to do. I find that's an easier jump start than trying to just type all the JSON in raw from the beginning. It's a lot of work. It's easier just to copy and paste, right? What I say, um, great artists steal, and that's basically what we want to do. We want to steal the existing JSON and reuse it for other purposes. So that's how we want to do it. So the other thing we need to do is we want to go into settings, and we need to go look at our API settings because they should be disabled. And if you go in API service settings, we need to enable the ERS APIs, and we want to enable the open APIs. So open APIs is something that we added beginning in ICE 3.1, and I'll show you what open APIs are about here in a second. All right, so easy enough. We enabled our ICE APIs, and by the way, we also have APIs to enable the APIs. So if you like that idea, stick around for Thursday's webinar, and I'll show you how to enable the APIs with APIs. But anyway, there's that. If you go back to the overview, we have all the ERS objects, resources, have been defined in an open API file here. And if you go ahead and you open that up, you can actually save this to your local computer. So I'm going to go ahead and save it to a folder here. I've already saved it once, but I'll do it again for just to make sure. And what this does is this is an open API format that allows us to share the API definitions with all their attributes and data types and all these kinds of things. We can share it with other tools like Postman, which you're going to see a little bit later. And it allows Postman to very quickly import them and allow you to start to use them very, very quickly. And that's what we're going to show you in a little bit. But first, I also want to show you the other API capability here with what's called a Swagger interface. So Swagger is a tool that's built into ICE, and it ultimately is, I can't talk and type passwords at the same time, so sorry. This is Swagger. This is a API utility that's built into ICE, and you'll also see this similar format in the ICE REST APIs reference. In fact, I should open that up right now. If we go to ICE-API, I'll show you guys that. So this is the ICE REST API reference, and it talks about introductory, how this stuff works. If you want some examples, it'll basically talk about this, kind of the stuff that we just went over, do groups with permissions and things like that. But this is where the good stuff is under API reference. And so what we've done is we have organized it by configuration. And these are all the objects that you can use to do configuration of things inside of ICE. Or there are other APIs that are more operational in nature. So you may want to operate or do things related to the operation of ICE. There are also some monitoring APIs. So if you want to monitor, you can go take a look at the different APIs for doing that. And you can see it has the same Swagger interface. I'll go show you what that looks like coming up. But also for upgrades, if you want to do upgrades by API, you have the ability to actually launch an upgrade by API as well. And this is hopefully, I'm hoping this is going to be the subject of one of my future webinars, probably in 2023. I'm going to do some of these other Ansible-based webinars showing you how to do provisioning of deployments using APIs and doing patching as well. But then the next thing, of course, would be to do a full-on upgrade. So we'll hopefully get to that in 2023. So something to look forward to. So anyway, these are all of the different references here, and it's all hosted in DevNet. And if we get back to the Swagger interface in ICE, what you can see is we have not all of the APIs. So the REST APIs haven't been added in here yet. We have the definition, but we don't have it embedded here in the tool itself. But these are some of the other open APIs that we've made available since ICE 3.1. So you can come in here and do things in the Swagger interface. So what I want to do real quick is try to show you some examples, and probably one of the easiest ones is something like a repository. So I can come in and I can try to get repositories, and if I click try it out, we'll see if I have any repositories configured. I do a get, execute it, and look at that. It even does a little curl command for us, shows us what the curl command would be. And we get a 200, which is a successful response. But in the response body itself, we got a null. So we don't have any repositories configured yet. So let's go ahead and uh, configure one. So the way we do that is let's hide the get, and now what we need to do is a post operation. And so for the post operation, we want to try it out. And you can see it even gives us a little sample, but that's not a very good sample. I actually want to do something a little bit more involved um, with FTP. So I actually prepared that with in my dcloud environment. I actually have a repository configured to do FTP. So I put that JSON in there and execute it. Let's see what happens. Okay, you can see the equivalent curl command. We'll get to this. We'll show you guys how this all works. And successfully created the FTP repository. Awesome. And if we were to go into ICE under maintenance repositories, ta-da, there it is, right? So we were able to create that FTP repository that didn't previously exist. And we could even try and go in and validate it and make sure it works. Yay, it works. In fact, there's even an API to list the files remotely. Of course, there's no files out there, but we could specify the repository name, try it out. Repository name is FTP, and execute. And you can see no files. But if there were files out there, it would show us a list of files. So that's pretty cool if you want to be able to see programmatically what's out there in your FTP repository or other repositories that you have. So real quick, just wanted to show you how you interact with that Swagger interface. You can do other things like you can launch. Now that we have a repository, we could actually go back and do a backup. So real quick, let's see if we can launch a backup. So what we want to do is we want to configure a backup. So we're going to do a post for a backup and try it out. And we have to fill in some information. So we know we have a FTP is the name of our repository. The backup name is going to be ICE webinar. And our encryption key is going to be there. Okay, good enough. And execute. All right, let's see. Equivalent curl command. And okay, so this is an interesting one. So if anybody who's ever done an ICE backup should know that these things can take like 10 plus minutes, right? Because it has to do a lot of work in the background. And so rather than sit here and wait and stare at a blank web page, what it does is it kicks off a background process or task, and it gives us an ID to that task. And so task is initiated, use the task service API to get the status of the backup job. So I'm going to copy this task ID. And now what we can do is we can go back and use a different API, the task API, and we can get all the tasks. Let's get all the tasks, try it out, execute, no parameters, just do it. Equivalent curl command. And here we go. Okay, so we have one task outstanding. It's in progress, and it's just in progress. Hasn't succeeded, hasn't failed. Everything's good so far. So the other thing that we could do is we can come in and notice that this get command has a task ID argument at the end. If we get that and we try it out, and if I paste that task ID that I copied previously and I execute on it, there's the same response. So Previously, we got all of the tasks, and there was only one. There's that same task, but we specified that one task individually. So if you wanted to check on it, if you wanted to monitor it, if you wanted to pull it, waiting for that success or the fail, you could go ahead and do that using this task API. And hopefully in like 10 minutes, we should have a backup sitting out on our FTP repository. So that's how you can interact with the ICE REST APIs directly using the Swagger user interface. Now we can get back to curl. Now that we've kind of done that, and hopefully I've been kind of showing you how the Swagger interface also does things in curl, because everybody thinks curl is awesome. It's the way that they even show you how to do it. So if you're looking for hints on how to do it, you can try it in this interface and then go do it with curl to make it more programmatic if you like. So I'm going to head back over here. First thing I like to do is to set up an environment. Whenever I do any kind of, actually, we're going to say that for Python, sorry. We're not going to do that. Well, actually, let's just do it right now. You don't need this for curl. I could do a curl operation right now, but I'm going to go ahead and set up an environment just so you guys get used to it. So I'm going to go ahead and install Python 3.9, and I'm going to install it in an environment called pip ind, Python installation Python. I forget what pip stands for. Basically, it installs Python packages. So I just installed Python 3.9 in an environment. And then the other thing I want to do for later is I want to do a script that requires a package called requests. It makes HTTP requests. So I'm going to install that package into that Python environment as well. And then I want to transition into that environment. And so I'm going to do pip ind shell. It's going to launch a shell. If you don't know all this stuff, it's okay. But at least you're getting introduced to this concept of an environment. This is really important when you install lots of different packages or you play with lots of different scripts and they all have lots of different dependencies. Stuff gets crazy really fast, and you can have conflicts if you try to run something in one environment, or if you don't use a different environment, you dump it all into your global computer software, then it can all get mashed up and get crazy and confusing and cause you problems eventually. So by breaking it down into different environments, you kind of isolate those problems. And so that's what we're doing. So it's a best practice to use some kind of environment shell like we're going to do here. So I've launched into the shell, and you can see previously I had a blank line above my current directory. And now you can see that it's launched this environment in parentheses. So it's the same directory, but it's this environment. And my environment, if you're not familiar with that in Linux or Unix, it looks like this. These are just these environment variables, kind of like global configurations. And you can see it's actually saying this is my virtual environment here. It's actually kept in a dot folder in my local directory. So back to curl. What we want to show you all here is, first thing with curl is we can do curl and help. So these are the basic options with curl, but there's a lot more, like I told you, right? And so if you do the curl help all, take a look at this. Look at all these command line options you can use with curl. It's crazy how many things there are to do. So don't get overwhelmed. I'm going to show you all the good ones for doing REST APIs, and we'll be able to make some quick progress with using curl today. So the first thing we want to do is let's just go connect to our Icebox. My Icebox is in a dcloud demo environment. It's called ice.securitydemo.net. And if I do a curl connection to it, it looks like that. Not very exciting. We have a problem. And the problem is we got a 301 error. So what we want to do probably is let's take a look at the HTTP headers to understand really what's going on here. So one of the options is to use include. I'm going to use the full parameter name. You can do like one letter options. I'm going to do the full one. I like to be explicit, make it really painfully obvious for you all. So I'm going to use -- include. And what this one does is it goes ahead and includes the HTTP headers. And you can see we have the HTTP error response code 301. It moved permanently. So this is this is not the URL you are looking for. You want a different one. And it appears to be at this location. Okay. So basically saying don't use HTTP, Thomas, use HTTPS like a proper security person. So let's try that. So if we try again and we go to HTTPS, all right, better, not quite. So now we're getting to 302, again, redirect. So what's the problem? Okay, well, location now has been moved to :443 with a /admin. All right, copy that, try again, paste it, let's go. Okay, close, not quite, Thomas. Got redirected again to a 302. And now it wants us to go to, a login.jsp page. Okay. Um, I don't need the extra slash. Go there. Okay. Finally, we got some HTML and JavaScript. So and we've hit the ICE UI on my ICE node. All right. So that was a lot of work. But I wanted you to see that this happens. And so a lot of times by default, I will always just include this convenient dash dash location option, because what that does is it automatically follows redirects. So I don't have to do that manually. It will just magically follow it. So watch this. I don't need to put all this other garbage in here anymore. I can just go with my other one and magic happens. Same place. I ended up at the same place, same result. I didn't have to do all that additional URL redirection. So that's when you're bound to include or bound to find at some point. The other thing that we want to do is let's go ahead and one more I'll show you. That's, I know a lot of you, if you like want to play in your lab or something, you probably aren't going to take the time to do a self-signed certificate. And unfortunately, even for some of you, you have a self-signed certificate in your production deployment, which is terrible, highly unrecommended. Shouldn't do that. That's terrible. But you do it anyway. If you are going to do that with a self-signed cert, you probably should upgrade. But if you're not going to do it for whatever reason, I'm going to show you how to simply use the dash dash insecure, and that would go ahead and would not give you an error about a bad certificate with HTTPS going to whatever server you're going to access. So that's another great option for you to know. So what we want to do next is let's go ahead and actually try to look at my network device. So for that, what we're going to do is go ahead and go to ERS, ICE's Extensible RESTful Services. We're going to do some, that's basically considered a configuration of a network device. So if I hit return, this is what I get. So we need to be able to look at my network device, but I am getting an unauthorized error, 401, right? So this is telling me, Thomas, you got to authenticate. So for that, what I need to do is I need to go in and I need to do a user auth. So I need to specify my username, and I'm going to use my super admin, and I'm going to use my super admin password. All right, and I'm going to hit return. 415. Okay. 415. Remember, I told you guys you were going to get some of these today. And so when you get a 415, that is like improper media or something. It's a really confusing term, but really what it means is you need to tell it what type of data you want back. And for that, we need to use a header. And that header looks like this. We need to do header, and we got to specify that we want to do, we're going to accept in our response back from the server, we are willing to accept application/XML. Okay. So this is, we're going to get XML back because remember when ICE was first implemented back, ICE 1.0, like 2010, 2011. There we go. Look at that. Now we got a 200. The default response back was XML. JSON hadn't quite won over the world, but we did implement JSON. So all we have to do to get JSON is to come back in here and say, ICE, no thank you. I don't want XML. I really want JSON. Ah, look at that. Oh, that beautiful JSON. So much easier to read, right? So there you go. That is a basic REST API query. It took us a lot to get there, but I wanted to show you some of the things you're very likely to encounter when you do this. Now, the other thing is, well, this doesn't look like a network device. I mean, that's the name, but where's like the radius password and all that kind of stuff, right? Well, to do that, you actually need to get the full details. So ICE only gives you the summary at first to tell you these are all of my network devices. If you actually want to get the details, you need to reference this specific ID as part of that request. And so to do that, you need to tack on that UUID. And now when we do it, ta-da, look at that. That is a proper JSON definition for an ICE network device. So now you can start to see the Radius protocol configuration. There's my password. I'm not doing key wrap or DTLS. I don't have multi-secret turned on, and all this kind of stuff. Now you'll notice there's this link thing down here. This is basically telling you if you want to details, this is a link to itself with that ID. You can just kind of ignore that. And otherwise, here is the network IP for that network device, and these are the groups that it belongs to. Just using the default groups today. So one other thing I told you about JQ, which I want to show you. If you try to use JQ, all you have to do is you do a quick pipe into JQ and hit return. Well, that didn't work, Thomas. That doesn't look good. So a couple things here. What you want to do is you want to turn off that transfer table, whatever you call it. I'm going to go, let's just go back to the beginning of the command line. And I'm going to add another command in here called -- silent. That will turn off that little download transfer table. And let's see what that looks like. Okay, better, but you're still getting an invalid numeric literal, Thomas. So what that means is jQuery or JQ is not able to parse the response. And the reason for that is, you may recall, we're actually asking curl to return all this header stuff. And that's not JSON. So it totally barfs on it and says invalid numeric literal at line 1. Not very intuitive, but that's what it means. So here's what we got to do. One more time. Let's go back. And we now need to remove that include. It has served us well up until now, but now it is not helping us. We need to get rid of that include to remove those headers from the response. And so, oh, look at that gorgeous JSON, right? Look at that. It's all pre-printed. It's got colors. It tells us the keys versus the values. Really, really nice. It even highlights integers separate from strings. Pretty cool, huh? So that's what JQ can do. Just to make it more readable, I like it. You can do other cool things beyond that. I don't think I have a query quite ready to go yet. And we're kind of getting low on time, so I'm going to skip past being able to do a full query. But you can do some interesting things with jQuery, like I said. I tried to give you some examples. So what we can do next is let's go ahead and show you some other interesting things. So the first is, if we look at this command line, it's getting really long, right? This is kind of unruly. It's kind of hard to read after a while. Everything kind of blends together. And so a better way to do this is actually to do line continuations in the bash shell or any kind of shell. So the way that we want to do this looks like this. We're going to do this. I kind of typed it out ahead of time for you guys. So what we're going to do is we're going to use those same options. We're missing the include because we don't want JQ to have a problem. We're going to use a backslash at the end of each line to say we're going to continue that line, the same line on the next line. We're going to go ahead and use our user. We're going to have that header. We're going to have the URL, and we're going to continue that line, and we're going to pipe it to JQ. So here we go. Cool. Same thing. I forgot to include this. So if I wanted this in there, all I got to do is add it to the end. Command C, go back, go down, /, add the detail, and we're back, right? But look at how much I think it's easier to kind of break the command down by some of these long parameters and be able to see everything. Oh, I do have the JQ for you here. Let's say we only wanted to get our let's say we only wanted to get the name of our network devices. We could send it through a search result, say I only am interested in iterating through the resources and getting the name. So if I do that, that's my only network device name in the list. If there was more, I would list them all out, but I'm only interested in seeing that. So if you want to do some queries against that data, you can do it pretty easily that way. The next, the next thing is hopefully some of you have been looking at this and cringing because Thomas is putting his super secret ICE super admin password on the command line and broadcasting it to a webinar for everybody to see what it is. And that's probably not very good security practice. So what we want to do is we need to use something called environment variables. So what we want to do is, first of all, environment. This is your environment. These are the environment variables. What I want to do is create some for ICE. Let's see if I have any. If I type in, I grep on ICE, I don't have anything in there for ICE. So what we want to do next is let's go ahead and create some. We want to export these in the shell. It looks like this. So I'm going to create environment variables. I like to make it nice and verbose. So it's ICE, it's the REST username, ICE REST password, and my ICE host name. So I'm going to put that in there. And now if I do environment and I grep for ICE, ta-da, look at that. I can now see those environment variables are populated in there. This is a best practice to keep your configuration, especially your secrets in your environment where people can't normally see them. Like on a command line, saved in your history, things like that, that's usually a bad idea. And so the other way you can do it is you can actually save it into a file. And so I've actually already done that. And I keep these things in a secrets folder. So I'm going to show you guys all my secrets right now. Well, I'm not going to show you my secrets. I'll show you where they're kept. Right. I got lots of secrets for lots of things that I do, whether it's Azure, AWS, Meraki, ServiceNow, dCloud, all these different things, WebEx. I got lots of different secrets. And I've already populated some for this webinar, and I've put them in my ICE dCloud file. So I'm going to show you my secrets now. Okay. So I've already created some like ICE hostname and password. You can see I can reference a variable with a session ID up here. I can use it right here, but I'm going to override it with another one. So I've got all these different secrets I can keep in my environment in this file. When I want to use this file, all I need to do is source it. So if I go back up and I source it, and now if I look at my environment and I grep for those ICE things, look at all those great secrets now. Okay, so these are all in my environment, and I can use them in my scripts. And here's what it looks like. Whenever I want to reference them, what I can do is I can, oh no, my application where I'm keeping all of my things has crashed, so I'm going to have to try and use a different one to get my pre-built scripts, my commands. Where to go? Uh, I stressed. Oh, environment variables. There they are. Okay. I want to do this now. Okay, so what we've done is I've replaced my username with this variable name, IceRest username, and the password with IceRest password. And I've even replaced my hostname with ICE hostname. And now I can run it, and it still works, just like it did before, because I'm just using those variable substitutions from my environment. So that's how you can do that. And now, you can do a webinar with your super secret AWS stuff or Azure or anything else, and the world can see how it works, but they won't know your secrets. So that's pretty cool. Or even your colleagues, right? Or if you're on a bus or whatever, you're commute to work, kind of get something done, and you set something on a script. You don't want somebody sitting next to you to get your tokens or whatever, so you can do that. So what we can do is go on to the next thing, which is I did want to show you real quick paging. So one of the objects resources in ICE is the profiler profiles. And if we take a look at that, there should be a lot. Okay. I ran it through JQ so you kind of see it, but here's the first 20. If you look, profiler profiles, there's by default, there's like 678 of them loaded into ICE and alphabetically sorted by name. Here they are. Here's the first 20, right? Like we talked about. And notice the very last entry is next page. And so if you wanted to get the next page, this is the URL that you need to call to get the next page. And it says, currently we're paging with the size of 20, and you want to get page number 2. If I wanted to get 100 of them, I could actually make a request, and I would just need to do a query and say, I actually want 100. And oops, yeah. So notice it backs. It did it escaped these characters for me automatically. Otherwise, you need to put them in quotes like a regular string. Otherwise, it would cause problems for the command line. But if I want to get 100 of them at a time, it takes a little bit longer now because it's got to get 100 instead of 20. Okay, there they are. You can see it kept the size, and I can go on to page number 2. But look, there's like 100 of them. All right, still going, lots of them. So that's how you can do the paging. The next thing is um, I want to get into actually doing a post. So what we can do is I want to create a new endpoint. So we've been doing get so far. We've been doing reads. What we're going to do now is um, everything should look the same to you guys. Nothing's changed except for before we were just accepting JSON content right here. Now I'm going to send JSON content to ICE. And so I've got to tell it my content type that I'm sending you is JSON, application JSON. I'm going to send you an endpoint. I want to configure an endpoint resource. You don't, with ICE 3.1 later, you don't need the 9060. I just happen to have it in there. For those of you that are on older versions of ICE, you will need to put the 9060 in there. And this is the data I want to send to create an ICE endpoint. And so if I go ahead and send that, I get a 201. That's a success. I successfully created the object, and it says, if you want to take a look at that object, here's the location of it. So I could actually go do a query and take a look at that object right now, and it would be there. So um, another thing we can do is what you saw me do is I provided this little dash dash data option parameter in order to be able to send this JSON in quotes. And note that I had to wrap, there's all these double quotes in here. I had to wrap the double quotes in a single quote, otherwise the command line would be confused. So just be aware of those little details. The other thing you can do is if it's too much hassle or there's too much stuff to try and type or paste or whatever, maybe you've already created things in individual files. What I actually have here is I've actually got a file with an endpoint that I can send. And so if I do a cat on that file, I have this endpoint. It's got some custom attributes in it. And so what I can do now is I can actually send this file as JSON rather than having to send it all typed out in quotes on the command line, because that can get pretty verbose pretty fast. So what I want to do instead is something like this. Um, so what I'm going to do is I'm still going to use that dash dash data option, but instead of encapsulating it in single quotes, the JSON in single quotes, I'm going to preface it with an at. At says, go look at a file and include that as my data. Okay, so let's go do that. And we got a 201 back again. So there's that. We can also do patches. We can also do updates. We're really running low on time. So what I was really hoping to be able to show you guys Postman really quick. So let's jump over to that. Postman is a tool that basically takes all this command line garbage and makes it available in a GUI. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new workspace, and Postman is going to take some getting used to for those of you that haven't done it. ICE ERS open APIs. I'm going to make it personal. I don't need to share it with the world right now. Create a workspace. What this does is this creates like an environment effectively for this collection that we're going to import. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to import that open API file that I downloaded previously for the ICE ERS APIs. And we're going to go ahead and generate a collection of APIs from that file. So it allows us to use these APIs for doing testing with Postman or other tools if you're a developer. This is going to take like 30 seconds. It takes a little bit of time, unfortunately, to import this. And then when it does, it also gives me an error. I don't know why it gives me an error. I don't know if it's because it's so large, like a 2 megabyte file of JSON, but it always gives me an error. But it comes through just fine. So you can ignore the error. It just works. And we'll be able to use this with Postman. So the thing I'll mention about Postman is that it has this concept of environments also. The environments are kept over here. Currently, I have no environments. So I need to add them to here. I want to let this finish. So I don't want to mess up anything. I want to quickly show you how this works. I might run over a few minutes. Uh, there we go. See, import failed. Try again. But it totally worked. You can ignore this. If I go look at my collection, APIs, collections, that's not it. Oh, it's supposed to work. It's annoying. Let me try changing workspaces and going back. It was supposed to work. APIs. There they are. I don't know why. It's supposed to show up in collections. I don't know why it didn't show up in collections. But here they are. And now if I want to go look at my network devices again, like we had before, I can see my network devices. And if I want to do a get all, I click there. You can see it's got some of these query attributes in here. I don't want any of those. Turn those off. That'll only cause problems for right now. Don't use them unless you need them. And now if I do a send, totally didn't work. Okay, the reason it didn't work is because we have to authorize. We don't have any of our configuration information in here. So what we need to do is it's saying that it wants to inherit it from the parent. The parent is this collection up here. And what we can do is we need to provide a username and a password. So for that, we can set it as a variable. I don't want to set that variable. I want to set a different variable. So I want to do ICE REST username, and I'm going to show the password so I don't mistype anything. And I want to use ice rest password. And I can use these variables that I haven't configured yet. I still need to go configure them. But there's also some variables over here. So I'm going to hide that. What we can do is there's these other variables that it uses to compute the base URL. There's server and port. We're going to leave 443. If you are on an older version of ICE, you'll need to use 9060. And for mine, I'm going to use not localhost, but ice.securitydemo.net. And then the other thing is for my environment. In my current environment, I don't have one, so let's create one. Let's add an environment. I need to create my ICE REST username, and I'm going to give it an initial value of admin, which is my super user admin, and ICE REST password. And I'm going to give it ICE is full. All right. Now with these, I'm going to save it. You got to save it. That's important. Now I can change it to my new environment, which I should probably call something like dcloud. So I know it's my dcloud environment as opposed to AWS or my on-prem or production or lab or whatever my environment happens to be. So there's that. Now what I can do hopefully is go back down, and I've got this environment variable set so that when I do the query, it will properly populate the base URL and authenticate, and we should get a network device. Parameters, no headers, accepts JSON, connection refused, local host. Why is it going to the local host? So something's not quite right. Show value, current value, save. You got to hit that save button. I'm telling you, that'll cause so many problems if you don't hit that save button. Bam, there it is. See, you got to hit that save button. That'll get you. Gets me every time. That's how I knew, because I've been bit by it many times. You can see now we have all these different APIs at our disposal. If I wanted to get a specific one, I could, the specific value for this, I could take this, copy it. I could use get by ID, and you can see it's looking for that ID there at the end. And I would want to set the path variable here to that ID, hit send, and now I should get the details, right? There's all the detail for that particular one. So if this is easier for you, go ahead and use Postman if that's easier. At this point, we are totally out of time and beyond, so I need to end it. Didn't quite get to Python. I'm still going to have a script posted for you at my repository. I'm going to save it for you all later today. It's going to be here at this URL, so you'll be able to go check it out. And I'm going to fast forward to some other resources for you all, so you're aware of them. So I think you're all familiar with our typical ICE webinar resources, but then there are some other places you can go to get API-specific things for ICE and even other products.